Middleweights going at it here as we have Kyle Borralho coming in at minus 275 going up against Reinier de Ridder, who comes in at plus 235. Now, I was quite confident in Borralho as he went up against Nasruddin Imavov last September in a main event slot that would likely have produced a number one contender. Although I think Sean Strickland has kind of cut the line after his win over Anthony Fluffy Hernandez just a couple weeks ago. But regardless, Borralho ended up coming up short against Imavov. And I believe there was a couple of contributing factors. One of them being that just a few weeks prior to that fight against Imavov, Borralho was in Chicago cutting weight and made championship weight to be an alternate for the Dricus du Plessis and Khamzat Chimaev fight. I'm sure that did cut into his training camp and cut into his health a little bit, and I think that's why we didn't get to see him perform at his best against Imavov. Not to take anything away from Imavov. I thought Imavov did a great job in terms of asserting his striking dominance and really keeping Borralho at the end of his punches. Borralho really only had success, I believe, in the third round of that fight where he started to have some striking success, landing counters, utilizing the karate style that he's known for, but then Imavov picked it back up in the fourth and fifth rounds and was able to snatch the momentum back to get the decision win there. I did expect Borralho to grapple a little bit more. He did go 0-5 on takedowns, but I thought, we'd see him try to set up those takedowns a little bit better than he actually did. Now that snapped that crazy 16-fight winning streak that Borralho had, dating back to, I believe, his third professional fight. And I think that's kind of brought him back down to earth a little bit. But I still think he's a guy that could potentially challenge for a title in the near future. I know he's 33 years old, but a couple more wins, a couple high-level wins could definitely assert himself back into that title contention. He's a very well-rounded fighter. He originally came into the UFC as a guy that a lot of people thought was just a boring grappler, would take opponents to the ground and smother them or try to find submissions. But, he outstruck Paul Craig. Obviously, he outstruck Jared Cannonier over 5 rounds. Didn't really have many issues in that fight outside of one instance, but he pretty much beat Cannonier on the feet through 25 minutes, showcasing that he is a well-rounded fighter. But fighting a striker of Imavov's level, that's where we kind of saw his ceiling in that aspect. But very good fight IQ. He's often been an analyst for LFA Brazil, flexing his mental muscles and all that. Obviously, one of the founders of the Fighting Nerds, which is a team that had some very solid success until a year or so ago. But he is a very knowledgeable and smart fighter. Now, he's going up against Reinier de Ridder, who a lot of people are surprised that he ended up fumbling the bag against Brendan Allen back in October. That night, de Ridder was originally scheduled to fight Anthony Fluffy Hernandez. Hernandez pulled out, and in stepped Brendan Allen as a pretty big underdog. But outside of some success in the first round from de Ridder, where he got Allen to the ground, threatened with a few submissions, Allen eventually turned the tide about 6 or 7 minutes into that fight and kept de Ridder on his back and just smashed him with some nasty ground and pound over the course of the next 2 rounds, and that ultimately led to de Ridder quitting on the stool before round 5. And that's kind of de Ridder, or at least what we saw from de Ridder at the ending of his ONE FC career. Anatoly Malikin, I believe the guy's name was, forced de Ridder to quit in the rematch, but also beat him pretty easily in the first matchup. De Ridder is a nasty BJJ specialist and definitely left his mark in the UFC after making his debut in November of 2024. He rattled off 4 straight wins in the span of 9 months and then scheduled him for his second straight UFC main event 3 weeks short of his anniversary with the promotion. His win against Robert Whittaker was an eye-opener for me, as I thought that was a good fight for Whittaker to shut down de Ridder's grappling and force him to strike with him. But I think Whittaker's hesitancy in the striking game largely has to do with him kind of questioning his own durability. And that's where de Ridder was constantly able to move forward, land big shots, and eventually get to the grappling game when he needed it. But when he fought somebody that could handle him in the grappling realm and stay safe enough like Brendan Allen, that's where we saw de Ridder really start to struggle and eventually quit on the stool just as he has in the past. Now here he goes up against Kyle Borralho, a guy that I believe, similar to Brendan Allen, can stop de Ridder's advances in the grappling realm and force him to strike with him. And I think Borralho is a good enough striker to not allow de Ridder to command the respect there the way de Ridder did against Nickel and Whittaker. I think Borralho can counter him effectively, and I think he can just chip away at de Ridder. And I think those grappling exchanges could definitely eat some time off the clock, which leads me to believe this fight will hit the scorecards. But I think by the end of it, we will surely assert that Kyle Borralho will come out on top, being the more effective striker, being the one landing more effective damage, and completely shutting down De Ridder's grappling game. So I'm going to go Borralho here, Borralho by decision, and I don't mind parlaying him at minus 275 either.